Welcome to Honors World History. Today we're going to look at the series of crises that brought down the Ming Dynasty and led to some of my favorite Ming emperors losing the mandate of heaven and the Ming Dynasty eventually collapsing. So, here's our objectives for today. We'll take a moment and talk about the second half of the Yongle Emperor's reign, and then we'll get into all of the really interesting and eccentric emperors of the late Ming Dynasty. So, Zhu Di, in a lot of ways, wanted to try to outdo his father. He was a great military leader, just like his father was. He established great works like his father did. He expanded the power of China like his father did. And he also went through a period of paranoia and government purges, just like his father did. And so, just like Zhu Yanzhang before him, Zhu Di went on a series of government purges, killing a bunch of officials in a variety of different horrifying ways, until lightning struck his new forbidden city. Zhu Di had just, was in the process of building this forbidden city, and then lightning struck the city, and a significant portion of it burned down. Zhu Di took it as a message from the heavens. The Confucian scholars that he was purging also encouraged him to believe that this was a message from the heavens, that he should stop killing Confucian scholars for, what I hope are obvious reasons. And so Zhu Di, in his later years, decided to stop the purges and to allow his officials to rule, and he decided to take on more of a Confucian than a legalist ruling philosophy. Here are some examples of filial piety that were re-emphasized during the Yongle Emperor's later reign. And he also encouraged Confucian officials to be able to submit anonymous complaints about each other and about the government in general and about him in order to help him see and rule more effectively. On the surface, this seems like a good system. The problem with it became that these complaints almost certainly led to the conviction and execution of the person who was accused. And so this complaint box system allowed the Confucian officials who were sort of jockeying for power to be, the grand secretaries in the Ming Dynasty, to be able to kill their rivals with more or less impunity. And so the Ming Dynasty, it became a system in which lots of people could stop things from happening, but only the emperor could make things happen. But he could only make them happen with the support of officials who, could kill each other if they didn't like what was going on. So on the surface, it seems like a good system. In reality, it didn't work as well as one would hope. The tribute system greatly expanded during this time period. Chinese goods became sought after world over, and this is one of the things that's going to kick off sort of the European age of exploration, is the desire to get Chinese goods. The Yongle Emperor specifically loved the giraffes, which they believed were unicorns, and so several giraffes were brought in from Africa, as part of this whole tribute system, again, which demonstrates sort of the reach of China during this time period. And we're going to see spectacular cultural growth. The Ming Dynasty porcelain, or china, is going to reach its sort of pinnacle during this time period with the sort of blue and white patterns that we're probably all familiar with. Chinese art is going to focus again on these sort of natural themes. China is going to compile the world's first encyclopedia, the Yongle Encyclopedia, which is going to contain all the knowledge of all the Chinese dynasties up to this point, which is a huge accomplishment, in the early 1400s. And the Chinese are going to create this fabulous porcelain tower that was one of the wonders of the world until it was struck by lightning and burned down. They're also going to rebuild the Great Wall. Zhu Di was a great warrior who launched a series of campaigns against the northern steppe peoples, including the Mongols, driving them out. And after getting some space and driving some of the Mongols sort of off their borders, Zhu Di is going to build this massive Great Wall. The Ming Dynasty Great Wall is the one that is mostly still standing today. And when people think of the Great Wall of China, they generally think of the Great Wall that was constructed under Zhu Di. But the Yongle Emperor, like all these others, it's going to create significant unrest and pretty heavy, tax burdens and, of course, labor requirements on the populace in order to construct this wall. And so the wall is going to have a cost. And the Ming Dynasty is going to really struggle, even with this wall, is going to struggle to deal with Mongol invasions for the rest of the dynasty. In general, the Ming Dynasty is going to also struggle to project power outward, especially after Zhu Di. And so here we see the local ordinances where take a moment, pause and read. We're going to see power divulge to the local level to some extent because of the sort of top down nature of Ming government. The Yongle Emperor is going to die as he lived on the campaign trail against the Mongols. He's going to launch one last attack in which he's relatively successful, although he dies on the journey. Famously worried that the death of the emperor, especially without having sort of the succession secured, would lead to a crisis. They hid Judi's death. They put him in a carriage and surrounded it with rotting fish so they couldn't smell that his corpse was decaying. And they snuck him back into the capital. And then they announced, oh, well, the Yongle emperor has died. And so he was succeeded by his son, who was not as good of a ruler as Judi. And the son after that was also not a particularly effective governing ruler. And so, what's going to happen during this time period is we're going to see the rise of Mandarin officials. These government officials are going to get increasing power. The goal of the most powerful role in China is, of course, the emperor. But what happens if you have an emperor who is not particularly interested in ruling? Well, the grand secretary starts to become sort of the height of power. And so we're going to see a lot of Confucian officials sort of jockeying and purging each other, trying to get this top job. And then once you get there, trying to hold on to it by pointing the finger at everyone else as far as why things are going wrong in China. And so it's going to lead to not some great outcomes. When emperors during this time did try to take matters into their own hands, for example, Emperor Yingzhong tried to launch an invasion, tried to launch an attack on a Mongol force that was rampaging around northern China, things don't go great. Yingzhang's force of about 1 million troops was defeated by an army of only tens of thousands of Mongols, and Yingzhang himself was captured by the Mongols and dragged back to Mongolia as a prisoner. The Ming Dynasty did not totally collapse because at least the next emperor who rose to power was an effective Confucian ruler. The Hongzhi emperor ruled diligently, attempted to emulate Zhu Yanzhang and Zhu Di, the dynastic founders, by taking control of the affairs of state, organizing the bureaucracy, solving problems, and ruling China effectively, which was absolutely necessary for the government to function. Unfortunately, he did not he only had one son, and this son was not a particularly capable ruler. So when he died, things are going to pretty spectacularly fall apart. Here we see chaos and people attempting to sort of implement Confucian rules in their own life. So take a minute, pause, and read. And the Zhengda emperor is going to be one of the worst emperors in the Ming Dynasty. He was vain and disinterested in ruling. He once spent the equivalent of $8 million on lanterns for a festival, which he then accidentally burned down a portion of the Forbidden City. He also decided he was a great warrior and was horribly injured trying to fight a tiger. He then decided that he was a great general, took the name Zhu Shu, and set up mock battles where he could go out and prove his military prowess. His era was an era of corruption and stagnation. After him, Yan Song took over the Grand Secretariat. You had a series of emperors who basically locked themselves in the Forbidden City and refused to rule. The Jiajing Emperor is the best example of this. Yan Song took over by basically accepting no blame for anything. He rose through the ranks of the Grand Secretariat by making sure that all decisions were made by other people. So when they went horribly wrong, he could purge those people and accept no responsibility. And so his reign and the Jiajing Emperor's reign was one of pretty spectacular, again, corruption, graft, and poor governance. Hai Rei became known as one of the bureaucrats to stand up against this, famously standing up and accusing the rest of the Grand Secretariat of corruption, and then thrown in jail and sentenced to death for his speaking honestly. During the Wanli Emperor's reign, this is the last truly even partially effective ruler of China. Zhang Zhuzhang was his prime minister, who was able to some degree, rule effectively in the early years of the Wanli Emperor's reign. The Wanli Emperor himself found the bureaucracy tiresome. and overwhelming. And so for a few years in the beginning of the Wanli Emperor's reign, things were fine. In the end, the government is just going to more or less fall apart. We have three main military campaigns which sapped the last of the Ming Dynasty's resources. First, the Miao Rebellion in the south, then Mongol incursions in the north, and finally the Japanese invasion of Korea. Although China ostensibly wins all of these engagements, they're going to exhaust the last of the Ming Dynasty's capacity. And between the Jiajing and the Wanli emperor's refusal to govern and sort of locking themselves in their palace and refusing to do anything, eventually the Ming dynasty is going to collapse. You're going to get the calamities, you're going to get the floods. The last Ming emperor is going to hang himself from a tree rather than be captured by a rebel general who's going to take over and declare a new dynasty, the Shun dynasty, which is going to last for a very, very short period of time. Because north of China, a group that used to be called the Jurchens, but is now sort of called the Manchus for reasons that are more or less lost to history, have been increasing their own power, and they're going to sweep across China, establishing the last imperial dynasty, the Qing dynasty. But we'll dive into that one next time. So that finishes the Ming dynasty for us. And when we come back next time, another foreign group is going to take over China and is going to establish the last, as we said, imperial